If you've ever found yourself torn between loyalty and clarity, leave a comment, hit like, share this story, and follow the channel so you won't miss the next chapter. I'm Delilah, 30 years old, a communications strategist at a small agency in Richmond, Virginia. I'm the middle child. Not quite remarkable, not quite forgotten. But in my family's eyes, I've always been the one who stirs up trouble. That family meeting that night shattered everything I'd been holding together. When I walked into my parents' house, the living room was packed. Folding chairs had been pulled from the garage, chipped cups were scattered everywhere, and the air smelled like stale coffee and expectation. I looked around. Uncle Gordon, Aunt Lila, even my grandmother, who rarely left the nursing home, was there. I hesitated. "What's going on?" My mother, Evelyn, didn't answer. She stared at her palms. "Sit down," said my father, Walter, his voice as flat as the tabletop. I took the only empty wooden chair, between my sister Natalie and my brother Chris. No one smiled. No one asked how I'd been. Chris started, "We need to clear some things up." I gave a tight smile. "About what?" "About how you've driven customers away from the store," he said. My brow furrowed. "Sales have dropped because of the economy, you know that. You what?" Natalie cut in. "Pushed those ridiculous online ideas? Made the website look like we sell high-end stuff? Some woman from Mom's church group asked why we're suddenly catering to fancy people?" I exhaled slowly. "We talked about expanding our audience." "Don't lecture us," my mother snapped. I turned to my father. "I followed your request. You asked me to handle the marketing. You approved the plan." He smirked. "I agreed because you pressured me. You threw all these conditions into the cosign loan. I had no choice." A lump rose in my throat. Aunt Lila slammed her spoon on her saucer. "Can't take that smug tone. All these years you thought you were some big shot, big enough to ruin a 3-generation store?" "I didn't ruin anything," I said quietly. My grandmother, who used to sneak me mint candies, just shook her head. Her eyes cloudy, but fixed on me. Chris held up a paper. "These stats show our regular customers dropped off right after you rebranded." I snatched the paper. "That's misleading. Total revenue has gone up. New customers are growing. We've never had a campaign this effective." "We don't need new customers, Delilah," my mom said. "We need to protect our reputation." I clenched my hands. "Reputation doesn't pay off loans, Mom." Silence thickened like fog. My father stood and pointed at the door. "You've done enough. Now go. And don't come back." I stood still. My heart beat slower than usual. Part of me wanted to shout, to slam my fist down. But the other part knew this role by heart. My mom didn't look at me. Natalie was on her phone. Chris crossed his arms. I placed the folder on the table. "Here's a breakdown of all transactions and the recovery plan. Whether you read it or not, that's your choice." No one responded. I turned around, walked out of the house that held both my childhood and my bruises. I didn't know if I was leaving a family or finally stepping toward myself. But I knew this much. I hadn't realized that was only the beginning. I drove home in silence, the windows fogged slightly with my breath against Charleston's damp winter air. My hand still clenched the steering wheel long after the red light turned green. In my head, the voices from the night before echoed clearly, no microphone needed. "You ruined everything. Reputation isn't your playground. Leave, and don't come back." I couldn't explain why my grandmother's look hit the hardest. Not angry, just disappointed. Like I'd dropped her favorite china. I remembered being 7 or 8, a grayish autumn afternoon. Not cold, but brisk enough to numb my fingers under running water. Natalie was jumping rope, Chris kicking a ball in the yard. I was in the kitchen, washing the dishes Mom had told me to handle. A crash. I ran out. The glass vase on the living room table had shattered, water soaking the rug. Chris stood nearby, ball still in hand, but before I could speak, Natalie pointed. "Delilah did it?" She walked past and knocked it over. I opened my mouth to protest, but Mom entered, her face already stormy. She didn't ask, just sighed. Can't we have one peaceful afternoon, Delilah? I claimed the mess silently, not because I was guilty, but because I knew if I argued, I'd be punished harder. After that, I learned how to be quiet. Quiet when I was blamed for Natalie forgetting her homework. Quiet when Chris burned a pot and I got called into the kitchen. Being quiet when Mom muttered, "You always complicate everything." When I got into college, a full-ride scholarship for communications in Atlanta, I hoped distance would reset something. I remember that night clearly. I walked into the living room, letter in hand, nervous. "Dad, Mom, I got a full scholarship," I said, voice small. Dad didn't look up from his paper. "Good. That'll save us money." Mom just asked, "Do they even teach anything worthwhile at that school?" Chris scoffed. "Communications? Isn't that just talking?" I folded the letter and tucked it away. No one asked more. The summer before I left, I packed my room, sorting through old photos, mostly family shots where I stood off to the side. Not sad, not angry, just numb. I promised myself this time will be different. I'll build things on my own. I won't need anyone's permission. But when Natalie called and said she missed me, and Mom had been sleeping a lot, I slipped back into the role. The one who holds it all together. That year, I called more often, mailed cookies, wrote holiday cards. Their replies? "Yeah, we got it," or "Too sweet, next time less sugar." Sometimes I thought, maybe I was just a faint blur in their family photo. Optional. Replaceable. Honestly, I'd gotten so used to carrying the blame that I stopped noticing the weight. Until I signed that loan guarantee for the store, that's when I started to feel what family responsibility really weighed like. I hadn't realized. I'd only just pulled my hand above the surface. I used to believe leaving Charleston would ease the pressure. I applied to college in Asheville, over 3 hours away. Far enough to not be summoned for Sunday dinner. Close enough to not be accused of abandoning home. In the first year, I called every Sunday. Just for a few minutes. I'd ask how everyone was, listen to Mom talk about Natalie's sore throat, Chris's new car, and how Dad still didn't like the new neighbors. "How have you been?" was always the last question, like an afterthought. "I'm doing fine." That became the default answer. I worked part-time at a cafe near campus, poured almond milk into cups, wiped tables after my shift, slipped free cookies to sweet kids. There, no one knew I was Walter's daughter, owner of the legendary wood shop on Rivers Street. I was just Delilah, a sophomore who liked her cold brew with vanilla cream. I remember one afternoon, peeling crayon wrappers for a design project, when my phone rang. It was Mom. "Do you have a minute to talk?" "Yeah. What's up?" Her voice was a little low. "Natalie failed math. She didn't tell anyone. We only found out from the warning letter. Your dad's really upset." I leaned against the wall, dropped my pencil. "I can call her, give her some encouragement." "Well," she said, "ever since you left, she's been off balance. No one at home to talk to anymore." I stayed quiet, then said, "I'll text her." After the call, I stared at my box of colored pencils, everything as scattered as my thoughts. I wasn't there anymore, but somehow I was still pulled in, like I was sitting in the kitchen corner, hearing everything. Later, the calls from home followed a strange pattern, a question followed by a guilt jab. Mom's sad none of her daughters call unless it's her birthday. Chris said, "You're always busy, but somehow we see you posting concert stories." Dad said, "You do marketing but can't figure out how to promote the family business?" I still sent birthday gifts, holiday cookies, transferred money to help Mom fix the washer, but none of it was enough to change how they saw me. After graduation, I got an offer as a strategy assistant at an agency in Raleigh. The pay wasn't great, but the work environment was solid. My friends cheered. Finally, adult life. Me? I moved back to Charleston. I told myself it was to be closer to home, to save money, and look for better opportunities later. But truthfully, I hadn't cut that fragile thread yet. Part of me still wanted their approval, even just once. I rented an apartment 20 minutes from my dad's wood shop. Every Friday night, I'd go home for dinner. Every Sunday morning, I'd drop by the shop to help out. Each visit, I'd sit a little straighter, smile just right, and stay silent through the usual. Other people's daughters move away and succeed. Marketing's all tricks nowadays. You talk nice, but do you know anything about real business? I smiled. I drank water. I nodded. And I kept telling myself, just a little more effort. Maybe this time will be different. But what awaited me at the next dinner was a whole new kind of challenge. That night my father called. His tone wasn't gentle, but it wasn't cold either. "Delilah, can we talk tomorrow?" I looked at the screen, then simply replied, "Sure." The next morning he asked me to stop by the shop early before opening. It was early spring, still damp and chilly, with light coming through the front glass and dust floating like fog. The shop smelled the same, old pine and varnish. The brass bell gave a dull ring as I pushed the door open. Dad sat behind the counter, holding his usual cup of black coffee. No sugar, no cream. The way he started every day. "Have a seat," he said, nodding toward the chair across from him. I pulled it out and placed my backpack on the floor. He didn't look at me, just pulled out a thin folder. "I'm considering restructuring the store," he said, like he was reporting the weather. "The last few quarters haven't looked good." I nodded. "I know. I want to apply for refinancing. The bank needs a co-signer." I froze. "Me?" He looked directly at me. "Chris is still paying off his car. Natalie just got a mortgage. You have good credit and a steady income." I took a deep breath, eyes scanning the folder. "I'll need time to review this." He nodded. "Of course. But make it quick. The shop can't handle many more months like this." On the way home, I called Dr. Miles, the therapist I met during my last year in college, when insomnia and family stress had spiraled. "Listen," she said after I explained everything. "If you decide to do this, you need it in writing. Every detail, every boundary." I spent 2 nights reviewing the contract, printing it out, underlining every clause. Then I wrote an addendum with 3 conditions. 1. I would have full access to all business accounts. 2. Major financial decisions would require my written consent. 3. There would be monthly meetings to review progress. I brought it to the shop Monday morning. Dad read it, said nothing for a while. He tapped his fingers on the edge of the counter. "You don't trust me?" "I trust numbers," I said. He frowned. "I feel insulted." I shrugged. "This is the only way I can be involved without losing myself." He stayed silent, then signed. His signature trembled slightly but pressed hard enough to bleed through the page. So I became the co-signer for the refinancing loan of Walters Woodworks, the name in big bold letters on the sign, but one that never included mine. Even so, I still hoped that this time I'd be seen not as a shadow, but as part of something real. I didn't know that signature was really a ticket into another maze. 3 months after co-signing, I was basically working 2 jobs. By day, I strategized for clients, small brands in Raleigh looking for identity. By night, I became the unpaid communications department for Walters Woodworks. I built a new website, ran targeted ads, wrote product blurbs late into the night, carefully choosing words for middle-aged customers. Now and then, Dad would email short notes, nice photos, or "looks decent." Mom still invited me for Sunday dinners, with lines like, "You made your dad's computer freeze." I got used to that. What I wasn't used to were the strange withdrawals I began noticing in the company account. One early June morning, I checked the bank statement as usual. There were 2 large cash withdrawals, each nearly $2,000. No descriptions, no receipts. I called Dad. "What were those withdrawals on Tuesday?" He hesitated. "Personal expenses. Owners withdraw like that all the time." "That's nearly $4,000 in 1 week. Doesn't that seem odd?" "I know what I'm doing. Don't start lecturing me about running my own store." We agreed all major decisions would be mutual. Withdrawals aren't major decisions. I went quiet. I didn't know what to call it, but it wasn't right. I told Dr. Miles about it during my Wednesday afternoon session. You're reacting appropriately, she said. It's just that others aren't reacting the way you hoped. If you've ever stayed silent because no one believed you, or been blamed just for telling the truth, leave a comment. Share this story if you believe someone out there needs to hear it. 2 weeks later, I got a message from my mom at midnight. Delilah, the store is in serious financial trouble. Your dad won't listen to anyone. Your siblings are here. Can you come by early? The next morning I went over. The kitchen smelled like burnt coffee and silence. Chris flipped through the ledger and said quickly, "The account is nearly empty. A major order just got canceled because we didn't have the right type of wood. Supplier cut us off. Unpaid invoices." I looked at Mom. She nodded. "Your father didn't tell anyone about this." "Where is he?" "Not sure." Chris glanced at me. "Someone called, said they're from a casino in Winston-Salem." I froze. "A casino?" "He's been away a lot lately." I inhaled. The air felt cold. My hand trembled on the table. "Why didn't anyone say something earlier?" I asked. Natalie replied, tired. "Every time I bring up concerns, people say I'm overreacting. You did too." I didn't argue. I just looked down, opened my laptop, and logged into the bank account. The balance was clear, almost zero. And below it, a note. Hold, $12,000. Reason, third-party dispute. I didn't know the exact details, but I knew one thing for sure. I'd just stepped into the very storm I thought I'd dodged. The next morning I got up at 6 a.m., made a cup of ginger tea, and left it forgotten on the stove. I spent nearly 2 hours reviewing every store account, matching transactions with the last 3 months of statements, almost 20 unmatched withdrawals. All cash, no receipts. The largest, $12,000, matching the current bank hold. I closed the laptop, noted the key points and printed out a summary. I didn't know if anyone would actually read what I brought, but I needed to come prepared. The family meeting was set for 7 p.m. at my parents' house. When I arrived, cars filled the entire driveway. I recognized Chris's, Natalie's, Stephanie's, his wife's, and, also, Uncle Marcus and Grandma's. No one greeted me except the door closing behind me. The living room fell silent as I walked in. All eyes turned to me. Dad sat in the middle of the couch, shoulders sagging, eyes red. Chris started. "We need to be clear. Everyone's affected. And you're the only one with legal access to the account." "What do you mean?" "You could have stepped in sooner. You should have." I laid the folder on the table. I spoke up. Dad pushed back. "Everyone here knows that." Natalie crossed her arms. "Then why didn't you stop him? You made the terms. You had the right to block transactions. Not when someone pulls cash and doesn't report it." "You're the smart one. The one who always sees through people," Stephanie chimed in. I looked at Mom. She stayed silent, eyes down, like something important was on the table. "Has anyone ever asked what I needed?" I asked, keeping my voice even. "I've helped. For free. I've warned. But when things fall apart, I'm just the easiest one to blame." "No one's blaming anyone," Uncle Marcus said. "But you signed that agreement. If there's accountability, you share it." I didn't know what I expected, but not this. Not a flashback to middle school. Getting blamed because Natalie forgot her homework. I stood, holding the analysis. "I'll be forwarding everything to my attorney and to the bank. If there's an investigation, I'll provide the data. But I'm not carrying the cost of this family's silence." Chris scoffed. "An attorney? Who do you think you are?" I didn't answer, just packed my things. Mom whispered, "Delilah." I looked at her, not angry, just waiting for something honest. But all she said was, "This shouldn't have gotten this far." I nodded. "Exactly. It shouldn't have." I walked out of that room with a feeling that was both familiar and brand new. Not pain. Clarity. I thought I'd outgrown that role, but clearly, they'd saved it, waiting for me to step back in. That night, I drove around Lake Johnson with no real destination. My headlights skimmed the rippling water like bent metal. One hand rested loosely on the wheel while soft jazz played on the radio, none of it landing in my head. I didn't go home. Didn't stop for coffee. I needed space. Between who I had to be for them and who I was learning to protect. Close to midnight, I called Dr. Miles. She picked up after 2 rings. "I don't know if this still counts as family anymore," I said, voice raw. "The question isn't who they are," she said. "It's whether you still want to stay connected in the same way." I couldn't answer, but I knew one thing clearly. I couldn't stay in Charleston anymore. The next morning, I emailed Veronica, my boss in Raleigh, and asked for an urgent meeting. I explained it all: personal reasons, family stress, the toll on my work. She listened without interrupting, then said one thing. "If you want to transfer to our Atlanta office, the position's still open. No one's filled it." I nodded. My eyes stung, but no tears came. 3 weeks later, I packed up everything I owned: 1/3 books, 1/3 kitchen stuff, the rest work gear, and a few keepsakes I wasn't ready to let go of. I rented a small apartment near Inman Park, 3rd floor, windows facing a red maple, that caught fire every afternoon. No one knew I was there except my coworkers and Dr. Miles. No calls from family. No texts. No emails. I changed my phone number. I didn't feel sad. Just lighter. I know someone reading this might recognize themselves. If you've lived in a family where every mistake somehow has your name on it, if you've helped more times than you can count, only to be blamed anyway, leave a comment. Share this story. Maybe someone out there needs to hear exactly what you once needed. That first month in Atlanta, I showed up to work on time, left early, and learned how to sit alone in a diner without feeling guilty. I started jogging around the park each morning. Slowly. Just enough to remind my heart it was still alive. I called the bank and formally requested to remove myself as co-signer under the force majeure clause due to borrower misconduct. It took nearly a month, a stack of paperwork, and one brief hearing, but finally, my name was released from the sinking loan. I emailed my parents the update. No blame, no recap, just one closing line. "From here on, all legal responsibilities fall on the parties involved. I'm no longer part of it." There was no reply. I didn't wait. And that's when I realized, some silences don't need to be filled. They just need to exist without apology. November in Atlanta wasn't as cold as Charleston, but cool enough for a light sweater during morning walks. Red leaves scattered across the park paths, dry and crisp beneath my steps. The scent of soil and early wind helped me feel more grounded. I woke earlier than usual, brewed coffee, and sat on the balcony reading the print newspaper. A new habit. Not essential, but enough to begin a day without chasing phone notifications. Work stayed consistent. On weekends I signed up for a beginner painting class at the art center near Grant Park. The instructor was a brown-skinned woman around 40 named Marcia. Her voice was firm, and she had a habit of circling the room, gently adjusting brush strokes, but always letting each student choose their direction. "No need to make it pretty," she said on the first day. "Just make it true to how you feel." The first thing I painted was a chair. Old, lopsided, missing half a leg. Marcia looked at it for a while, then asked, "Has that chair ever held someone for long?" I didn't answer, but I knew clearly it hadn't. I kept in touch with Dr. Miles. We moved to online sessions every other week. Lately, she'd ask me questions I didn't need to answer right away. "How honest do you feel with yourself each day? When things are quiet, what stays?" I thought about the second one more. Some mornings, I remembered the old dining table, the sound of ceramic dishes clinking softly, the smell of Mom's stew, and the pressure to sit up straight, to keep my face neutral, just to avoid being picked apart. Those memories no longer made my throat tighten. They just came, stayed a moment, then drifted away like steam from tea. One afternoon, I got a message from an unknown number. "Are you okay? It's Natalie. I know I have no right to ask, but I just wanted you to know we're all managing in our own ways. I hope you're well." I read it 3 times. Didn't feel anger. I didn't feel moved. I just noted it. I didn't reply, not out of spite, but because I no longer felt responsible for responding to every signal that came from the family. That evening, I kept working on the unfinished painting. The chair now had a new leg, and this time I added a faint shadow beside it. Unclear whether it was a person or a tree. Marcia looked at it and nodded. "Feels like the wind's changing direction." I smiled, for once without guarding myself. I wasn't making grand plans. I wasn't forcing myself to become the best version of anything. I was just living a little clearer each day, making choices that didn't come from guilt or duty. And in that quiet, I started to feel like I was actually touching life. One Saturday afternoon, I sat on the porch with a cup of mint tea, skimming work emails, when there was a knock. Not the rushed kind from delivery, but 2 soft taps, like someone unsure they should be there. I opened the door. It was Mom. Her hair was grayer than the last time I saw her. The old crossbody bag had fraying straps. "Hi, honey." I stepped aside, no invite, no resistance. We sat at the kitchen table, smooth wood, the same one I used to paint on. She looked around. "Your place is tidy. I live alone." She nodded, eyes landing on the glass of water I poured. "I don't know where to begin." I waited. Didn't help. Didn't interrupt. Everything happened so fast. I thought I was keeping things stable for the family, but that stability turned out to be avoidance. I watched her hands. Still familiar, rough palms, trimmed nails, wedding ring so loose it nearly slipped off. "Your dad got a reduced sentence but can't run the business anymore. Chris is managing a small furniture store for now. Natalie still avoids talking about it." I stayed quiet. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," she continued, "but I want you to know I see it now. You weren't causing problems. You weren't sabotaging anything. You just said out loud what everyone else wanted to hide." The air in the kitchen thickened. Outside, I heard a bus reverse. Kids shouting on the lawn. "I called Dr. Miles," she said, "just to ask how to begin again when you're not the one who was right." I looked up. That one surprised me. She said I need to learn how to sit in the emptiness without trying to control it. I pressed my lips together. She'd once said that to me. Now the roles had reversed. "Where did you come?" "I don't know, maybe because, out of everyone, you're the one I understood least and missed most." I didn't say anything, but I stood, opened the cupboard, took out another teacup, set it next to her. Her hand trembled as she took it. "I just want to start by sitting with you. No blame, no defense." I didn't say yes, but I didn't leave the room either. And for her, that seemed enough for that day. After she left, I stayed at the table, eyes on the unfinished painting, the chair and the soft shadow beside it. I picked up my brush, mixed in a softer shade of blue. And for the first time in years, I realized I wasn't painting to understand the past, but to make space for something new. 3 months after that visit, I left Atlanta for a weekend trip to Asheville to attend a community art exhibition. One of my pieces had been selected in the personal transformation category. Nothing flashy, just the old chair, now with a tree's shadow falling across it, and a cup of tea resting on the armrest. No person, no caption. Marcia had emailed to ask if I wanted to title it. I told her to leave it blank. Whoever needs a name, he will already know it. In December, I received a letter from the bank. The entire old store loan had officially moved into legal proceedings under commercial bankruptcy law. I was no longer tied to the account or the obligations. I folded the letter and placed it into an old file box labeled closed. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel regret. Just done. Natalie started texting regularly. Nothing deep, just bits like, Do you prefer ginger or mint tea this time of year? Or it's snowing in Asheville, remember that picnic we had as kids? I replied when I felt like it, no rush, no pressure. Mom still called every other Sunday. Sometimes just to talk about a half-knitted sweater. Sometimes so quiet I had to speak first. Dad hasn't reached out. I'm not waiting. Chris is still the same. Busy, distant, occasionally liking my social media posts, never commenting. One evening in early January, I was invited to speak at a small gathering hosted by Reclaim and Redraw, a group sharing stories about healing from toxic family dynamics. I showed up with a cup of coffee in hand, my heart no longer tight when hearing the name Walters Woodworks. I didn't say much, just shared a few images. The dining table, where I had to sit still, my mother's averted eyes, the stack of documents I set down the day I was kicked out. After the session, a young woman, maybe 23, asked me, was there a moment when you truly felt like you'd stepped to the other side? I paused, then said, no single moment, just a lot of small choices repeated, every day, until I no longer felt the need to ask for permission. I don't know where you're listening from, in the car, before bed, or on a day when you needed a story to remind you to stand back up. Tell me where you're tuning in from. And if you'd like to hear more honest journeys like this one, don't forget to follow the channel, because the next story might be exactly what you need. Thank you for staying with me until the end. I'm Delilah, and now I live in a way that doesn't need anyone's approval. Delilah's story isn't just about breaking free from blame. It's proof that sometimes family isn't safe if you're always seen as the problem. In real life, so many quietly carry the weight of distorted expectations and emotional manipulation from those closest to them. Choosing to leave isn't selfish, it's brave. When we stop trying to be accepted, we finally start living by our own worth. And sometimes, freedom begins the moment we stop asking for permission.